were saying is very local. It's where the new Dominion facility is going in down in Wells Bottom, next to the PPG plant there. We didn't work there. I'll get into the kind of the history of the project. As you know, the construction's going on there right now. But that area historically is where Natrium Mountain is located in that bottom, which is tied into Smithsonian institutional work. And actually, it was some of those mounds in that area, the early kind of construction of some of those mounds, the early salvage excavations that happened there, that kind of led to the formation of the WVAS, the Archaeological Society, in the first place. So this area has a very rich archaeological history, not only in terms of the sites that are present, the artifacts, but also the history of professional and avocational archaeology within the state of West Virginia. You all hear me all right?
Yeah.
I'd rather not get up on the microphone. Most of my training was in Indiana. That's where most of my work's been, down in more in the southern Ohio Valley. But I have been in West Virginia for about 20 years, so for that period, Kentucky, southern Ohio, West Virginia has been pretty much the focus of our research. This site and this particular project, like all the work we do, is what we call compliance archaeology. We don't go out and just dig a site for pure research, and we're not able to spend years there like some university-based programs do in field schools. We're doing projects because it's basically mandated through state or federal law, usually in advance of construction, which is the case with this particular site. So when you do projects like that, you have a very strict timetable. You have to get in, you have to get out, you have budgets you have to adhere to. So you have to sample the site. You don't go dig the entire site. You look at ways to get the best information from the site in an expedited way, and this would still meet all the criteria for your research questions. And what I set up tonight, this project's still ongoing in the lab. I think the final report is due May 2013. So it's coming up, but there is an awful lot of work to do on a big excavation like that. The easy part is actually in the field. You can do that in a few months, but a lot of times it takes a year to 2 years in the lab to do all the analysis and write the reports. So what I've set up here is kind of like a history of the site, the timeline, dealing with its discovery, and how we went about determining if the site was important or not. And once we made those determinations, how we went about sampling the site to get what we thought was the best information possible within the time we had and the budget we had to do it. And all this work at this particular site, as I'll get into, was funded by Dominion. And Steve Pullins, the other names here, they couldn't make it. They're on another project right now. Jamie Neese was actually the project archaeologist. He knows more about the site than me or Steve does. He actually excavated the site. And I was more of a project manager dealing with budgets and things like that, none of the fun stuff. This is kind of the timeline we used on the site. We were hired to look at a larger area out there, both in the floodplain on that terrace and on the other side of the highway and more into the uplands, which was part of the property being purchased with this particular project. We did that in the fall of 2010. As you know, if you're familiar with that area, most of it's wooded or it's in pasture. You don't have plowed ground in the surface. So we'll get into the methods we use to sample below the surface on that. We found a number of sites out there. Only one of them went beyond when we actually went back and did excavation at. The other ones were we determined were not that important. So then in the spring 2011, we went back and did some test excavations at the site. Determined the site was indeed important, that it was eligible for the National Register of Historic Places. Once that determination was made, we worked with with Dominion and with the State Historic Preservation Office in Charleston to come up with what we call a Phase 3 or data recovery excavation, where we basically go out and do a much larger excavation at the site, and the completion of that Phase 3 then clears the project for construction. And I'll go through kind of the slideshow of this. I don't have a lot of artifact slides because we're still doing a lot of analysis, but I do have some that we'll get into a little bit later in the talk. This is the site here. Most of you familiar with this area, I assume? Right in this area. But right down here is the PPG plant. This is Wells Bottom. The blue area is this particular site we call Marshall 155. It's a big area. I think it covers 20-some acres out through there. We also surveyed on this side of the highway and other areas down and through here. But in this area, we found pretty much continuous scattering of artifacts when we went through there, and it's assigned a single site number. And this railroad track that goes right through here is right on the edge of the terrace. So this is on a terrace. This is an active floodplain of the Ohio River right down here. It's about 15 to 20 foot drop from this side of the railroad track to that side of the railroad track. This area would only flood during, major floods. Probably hasn't flooded in a long time. That was important to us when we went out there, knowing the geologic history of this area as to how deeply things might be below the surface. When we do a project like this in a valley, a lot of people think the valleys are eroding down. Anything on the surface will be eroded and carried away. But actually, since the end of the last ice age, the last 11,000, 12,000 years, the valleys in this area have been building up fairly rapidly. So on some of these surfaces, you won't find anything very old because they're deeply buried. That was the surface at that time. They've been buried as through periods of flooding when it deposits silt and sand and clays like that. So when we do a project like this, we also have to clear not only what's on the surface, but what might be buried deeply beneath the surface as well. This is what the area looked like in 2010. When we started, it looks a lot different now. Here's the site again. You can see on this aerial. There was another little site we defined right there, which was an African-American cemetery that wasn't recorded.
Did that remain intact?
The cemetery?
Yes.
As far as I know, it was avoided. There was a number of studies done to delineate the boundary of it and all the grades. So this is the area here. This is what it looks like. We're standing close to the highway, like back here, looking towards the river. In this particular slide, you see Ohio over here on the other side of the river. It's a little bit higher out through here. It's relatively pretty level. There's a little bit of undulation out there. That tree line right here, the small trees, they kind of line the railroad tracks. Like I said, once you pass that, then you drop down 15, 20 feet, then a short distance over the floodplain and you're to the banks of the Ohio River. Because of these conditions, the way we examined this area to see if there was a site there or not, what we call shovel probing. A lot of you may be very familiar with that, but we set up a grid on the site. Basically at the 15-meter intervals, or about 50-foot intervals. And at each interval, we dug a hole about 20 inches in diameter and about 20 inches deep, down through the topsoil until we got into subsoil. All that dirt was screened. All these are shot in with transit. And the artifacts or any material from each one of these is collected and bagged separately, so we know where it comes from on the site. The little circles that are white, nothing was recovered from those, no artifacts at all. The ones that are dark and black and something, at least one artifact came from those, or more. So you can kind of see there's, a lot of them are black. There's a scatter everywhere. But just having positive or negative doesn't tell you much about the density of things. Some may only have one or two, some could have 50 or 100 artifacts. So we take the same information, and this is all artifacts. If you can see down here, it may be kind of hard to read, but this is flint flakes, pieces of pottery, fire-cracked rock, any kind of artifact is in this total. And what's kind of interesting, if you can see it, areas of red and yellow are higher density than blue. If it's blue, it's basically no artifacts at all. Some of these have just a little bit of white around them. There's very, very few artifacts. So there's a big concentration of artifacts right here, another one kind of in between here, and down this area. And this is right along the railroad track here. So on that edge of that terrace overlooking the floodplain, there's a very high density of artifacts. Then out in the middle to the field as well. So this tells you some information about where things, maybe where the more important parts of the site are, as opposed to areas out through here where you may not expect to find much if you look more intensively.
What are the dimensions of the enclosed area, approximately?
The blue stripe there, the site boundary?
Yes.
I think the way we ended up delineating that was about 14 acres. Give or take a little bit. at this slide over here, this is just fire-cracked rock, nothing else. Pieces of burnt rock. And it has a similar pattern. There's a cluster out in the middle yet, a little bit more spotty out through here. You get individual clusters. Why would anybody have an idea why you'd be interested in the distribution of burnt rock? Most of them, it's not something you pick up and collect. You may see it on sites a lot. But what might it tell you about what's going on at the site and what you might expect to find below the surface? Right, it's associated, because it's cracked by heat, it's associated either with open fires where they're heating rock just to get warm. It could be associated with cooking ovens and things like that. So usually when you see a lot of fire-cracked rock on the site in this cluster, there's good indication that below the surface in those areas, if it hasn't been plowed too deeply, you can still find at least partially intact remains of fire hearths, cooking pits, and things like that. And it's in those areas too where you also get charcoal and other kinds of remains where you can get your radiocarbon dates. And the artifacts associated with those can give you good information on for dating particular styles of artifacts. So this is a good indication, at least at one time, they were doing probably domestic activities, cooking and processing food on the site. And if they're doing that, they're just not staying there for short periods of time. They're probably there for longer periods of time, months at a time possibly, doing the types of activities that where they create things below the surface. They dig holes, they fill them in with garbage, they use them for various things, and those things can survive the plowing because they go much deeper than the plows do. So this was a good indication right off the bat. You could have intact deposits on the site yet, even though they've been plowed for many, many, many years. This map here only shows the distribution of pottery. And that's a real nice, this is one of the cleanest clusters of pottery I've ever seen doing this. There's a little bit down here along the terrace, but a very nice cluster here that coincides pretty much with fire-cracked rock as well, and other kinds of artifacts. So all this information, from the phase one was telling us this site deserves to go to another level of excavation to see, at least in particular areas, that there are very important deposits there that could meet the National Register standards. We also had to look below the surface, like I was saying earlier, and we did this in concert with a geologist that specializes in river valley geology, alluvial sediments. And you can see on this particular trench, you can see the topsoil, how dark it is, and it's basically all plowed out. All the topsoil have been overturned many, many times by plowing. Once you got below the plow zone, basically we excavate the trenches, and this is a 50 centimeter little unit that goes in, which is excavated 4 inches at a time as we go down. Basically all the artifacts from these trenches, and there's a whole series of trenches across the site, came from the plow zone, or the disturbed topsoil. Once you got down to this lighter colored subsoil, hardly any artifacts at all, just a handful across the site. Then if you look at the types of artifacts that came, they range from the late Archaic up to the late woodland. So about 4,000 years old up to a couple thousand years old. And there's also a little bit of historic stuff in the topsoil too. So that lets us know that this surface, if you find artifacts on the surface that are 4,000 or 5,000 years old, you know that surface has been there at least that long. So it has to be stable. So it's been stable. That same surface you can go out there and walk on was there 5,000 years ago, more or less. But we didn't see anything deeper, so the surface could be much older than that. We just didn't, just nobody dropped artifacts on there that we found that were older. But we knew it was at least that old. We didn't find anything deeper at the time. So we really wanted to focus the rest of our excavations on that near surface, just right at the plow zone or right below the plow zone. And we would do a little bit more deep work just to make sure that there was nothing deeper that we were missing. What we did after we did this phase one, we knew the site was there. We knew that it had some clusters where the artifacts were. We knew like the site's maybe 13 or 14 acres, but there might be only about 1.5 acres or 2 acres that we're really interested in doing intensive archaeology on, based on the distribution of artifacts. We came in with this what we call geophysical survey, where it's kind of like ground penetrating radar. We use magnetometers and all that. We use the same grid, and what it does, this all looks, I know, kind of garblish. Yet I have a hard time reading it myself. But these little black spots that poke up, those are good indications that there may be a pit below the surface, a fire pit, a garbage pit that has a lot of burnt rock in it. It works on magnetism. And then we use a magnetometer to do this. Then what we did, we identified these. Then the guys that specialize in doing this within the company, they rate these as being almost certain that there's a pit there or a fire arc or something like that. Some of them are different color. Yeah, maybe it's not so good, but there's a maybe a 50-50 chance if there's something there. And some have very low probability. They could be that. It could be a tree root. They could be an old groundhog hole or something like that that's filled in. So you never really know. So this is the first thing we did when we started to go out to see what was below the surface. Then we followed this up. This is kind of showing that in a more schematic way. And once we identified all these possible hits where features were, then we worked out a sampling strategy where we went out to these different locations and we put like a test unit, a 2x2 meter, or roughly a 6-foot square unit over the top of them, and excavated it with shovels and screens to see if there actually was a pit below the surface. And in most cases there were. We come right down on top of them. You can kind of see these here. This is basically just removing the plow zone. This is all, the plow zone is disturbed, so it's taken off with shovels. The soil was screened. Here you can see the start. It's a little bit darker. There's a pit there. You can kind of see in the profile. Here's one full of rock, big earth oven. This is what the magnetometer was hitting on, this burnt rock. It really shows up. These two sites are features. We radiocarbon dated them. We took charcoal out of them, sent it off to a lab. This came out AD 780 to 980. And that basically means that there's a 95% chance that this pit was dug sometime within that range. Same way that this one. This pit was dug between 680 and 870. There's a 95% probability of that. So right then we knew, they're not exactly the same, but they basically both fall within the late woodland period. We also knew there was a lot of other carbonized material in there, seeds, nutshells, things like that. Give us good information on diet, maybe time of the year the site was occupied, what parts of the environment they were exploiting. We'd also get a little bit of bone out of it, but all the bone was burnt and just real little pieces, so we really couldn't do much with that. The soils are very acid at this site, so bone does not preserve very well, even in these pits like this. All these pits except one also had pottery in them. And the types of pottery that we saw, based on the way they were made, their attributes, the decoration on them, their size, their overall morphology, was very consistent with the dates we were getting. This time period is not very well known in this area of the valley. The way that people lived tend to be small sites, not big villages, like some of the Monongahela sites you get, where you get enclosed, palisaded villages. You don't get this on these particular kind of sites. You may get a couple of houses scattered. They got gardens most likely, and they're still hunting and gathering a lot as well, with horticulture gardening on the side. But the sites, there's so few people living at these sites, and they do move them around, that they don't leave a lot behind in one area a lot of times. So the sites can be difficult to find. And they've just not been a focus on. So we were real excited that we happened to hit this, because we're doing sites elsewhere in the state and adjacent states that date about the same time period. So it'd be a real good comparison type of site for this part of the valley to compare with up and down the valley for the same time period. Like I said, from these particular few features we hit during this stage, so there was a lot of carbonized remains in them. Almost all of them had a lot of wood charcoal, so they're cleaning out these fire hearths and these ovens, and they're dumping it in these refuse pits at the end. A lot of nutshell, seeds, and bark. Most of the nutshell is hickory, walnut, and acorn. A lot of weedy plants that they were probably using for food sources. The pottery is all rock tempered. There's no shell in it. Shell tempered pottery, go with your Monongahela stuff up here. It's a little bit later. we did a site up here a couple years ago. We had part of the pottery was shell tempered on the side, part was rock tempered, and that dated about AD 950, 960, something like that. So it's a little bit more recent than this site. And at this time, it's just right on a little bit early, right before that transition going into shell tempered pottery. But we found no diagnostic lithic tools, no arrowheads or projectile points in those particular pits. So basically, without doing really much work at the site in terms of going, below the surface or disturbing much of the site, we were within this larger parcel that we were responsible for. We were able to basically narrow down the important part of the site as being right in here and out through here. And with putting in only about 6 foot square units, we were able to confirm that there were good intact features below the surface. We knew how old they were, and we had a good idea there was probably nothing buried more deeply than just right below the plow zone. So based on that information, we went to the next phase of work. We designed a plan to sample these areas before construction started. This is really such a big, it doesn't show up very well. Basically what we did, here's that area out in the middle of the site. This is down along the terrace overlooking the river. We first went in and just excavated with a big track hoe, strips going through those. This is areas where we've been red with all the artifact, high densities. Just removing the plow zone in all these areas to see a sample of what's below the plow zone. Based on that, you can see where there's a lot of pits in the ground. They're either there or they're not. Based on what we saw, we had about 280 possible features, various types of pits. We selected areas that looked the most promising, then we opened up the larger blocks. This is kind of what it looked like in real life. These areas out through here, this is in that central part, out in the middle of the field. This is where the machine went down, just removed the topsoil, the plow zone. Then these guys would come through, shovel scrape the surface, get a nice clean surface, and they're looking for features below there, evidence of fire harsh, garbage pits, houses, burials, whatever might be there should show up on this surface. And it's a little bit easier in a site like this because the topsoil is so much darker than the subsoil that whenever there's an intrusion and they fill these pits in, a lot of this old topsoil got mixed in with it, as well as ash and artifacts. And against this light colored subsoil, those features show up just like a sore thumb. They just pop out at you. Here's that central area after it's been shoveled, after they went through with the shovels and cleaned it. See all these dark areas? All these circles are pits. There's one there, a big one in the corner, one there. They're all over the place. This is just right below the depth for the plow zone. So this is where our geophysical, our shovel probes and our geophysical and everything said we should have a good cluster of features. And we did find a nice concentration in there.
You do screen all that soil you take off too?
Not this. This was not screened here. This was taken off mechanical. We had a good sample of, we had a good idea of what was in the plow zone. The plow zone's mixed from like late archaic up to late woodlands. And, except for the pottery, there's a lot of the other artifacts you can't separate out unless you got a point. But all the flint debris, the chips, things like that, cracked rock, you can't say which component it belongs to. So it's always a decision. So we lost that information to go for the intact part of the site. Once you get these features, they're defined, they're shot into the transit, of course, so we know exactly where they're at on site. Then we usually bisect them, cut them in half and take out half of it with trowels. All that is screened through the mesh. And larger samples of that are bagged up before they're screened. And they're taken back to the lab, and we'll look while we do that later to get smaller artifacts out. The screens are 1/4 inch mesh. So in the field, anything larger than a 1/4 inch will be collected. A lot of artifacts, a lot of things you may want from a feature may not be a stone artifact or a piece of pottery. It may be the seeds, pieces of charcoal, nut, and things like that. They would go through the screen, So that's what's collected in the soil samples and are taken back and processed in a different way to recover those. But if you bisect these, and take half of it out, then you can see the shape of these pits. And the shape has a lot to do with the function, whether it's a refuse pit, whether it was an earth oven, whatever it might have been used for. And unfortunately, a lot of things may have been used for one thing initially, but at the end they were just filled in with garbage. So these ones that are filled in with garbage, or what we call refuse pits, are kind of like time capsules. You assume everything in those kind of they got filled in relatively quickly. Within a day, maybe a week, very short periods of time these things were filled in. So everything in them more or less goes together in time. So if you find pieces of pottery in here, or projectile points, or arrowheads, or other kinds of artifacts that you can't date by radiocarbon dating, you can take the charcoal from these and date the charcoal. Then because they're in there together, basically got filled in at the same time, you know that those artifacts date to about that time period. Doing that one time wouldn't be that convincing, but when you get large samples of dates from the same site and from multiple sites, you begin to develop your chronology for placing different artifacts in time. And that's why if you look in, artifact books, they can say, a Thebes Point or a Kirk Point dates to this period, Jack Sharif dates to this period, because they've been radiocarbon dated over and over and over. You get that range where they always fall within that range. So it kind of gives you a temporal span for how old they are. More features, and this was a common thing. They're not exciting to look at, but they do have an awful lot of information. Most of the rock we see was collected down along the river. Of course, the river wasn't like it is today with the locks and dams on it. It would have been free-flowing. You had gravel bars, things like that. A lot of river cobbles. There's also some material coming in from the bluffs, larger pieces of tabular sandstone. But by and large, they're using river cobbles. Heating those things and cooling them, and eventually they're cracking. You can just see the amount of rock. And this is what those magnetometers are hitting on again and again. Some of them aren't very big. They're just kind of basin-shaped, somewhat steep-sided. But almost all of these features contain pottery, which let us know that everything in that cluster is dated to the same occupation, which is kind of unusual, because a lot of times you get one site where everybody and their brother stopped and lived there over thousands of years. Things get all mixed together, and it's hard to sort it out. When you get a fairly clean site like this, it makes it much easier to do analysis and interpret what they're doing there, because it's not mixed with debris from other people, at least below the surface. Some of these go much deeper. See, like some of these, and some of these have different zones. It's kind of hard to see in the photographs. You can almost see where they put in different cleanings from fire harsh. You get ash lenses, things like that you can kind of work out if you want to get different radiocarbon dates for. But this is where all the samples come out. You can kind of see the black specks in these if you've got real good eyes, and that's the charcoal and the pieces of nutshell and things like that. They give you so much information. We also found evidence for one house at the site. All these are post molds, kind of open in this area. I'm not sure if one was missing or that was open, but they kind of form a rough circle. Within there's some large features. These are the post molds going around. This is the larger features inside. Right in the middle, there's a celt, not a real nice one, but right there's the bit end. And there's a number of larger posts on the inside as well, which may have been internal supports for the roof. As far as I know, this may be the first Lakewood house dating to this period identified in West Virginia. Like I said, they're very, very hard to come by, these sites dating to this particular period. This would have been a wood post structure. It did not burn in place. There's no evidence that it burned in place, so it was just abandoned, eventually decayed. But the post holes show up just like the features do, the big darker features, but they're much smaller in diameter. When they're profiled, you can actually see the shape of the post going down and the base of it. So, because you can also get things that look similar to post molds. They could be a tree root, a rodent burrow, or something like that. So when you profile, is how you can separate a post from a non-cultural piece.